Hello and welcome to today's session. Today is our last video recording and we're talking about metabolic syndrome. So let's dive in. Okay, metabolic syndrome, this is a commonly diagnosed condition. However, most people have never heard of it. And we're going to talk about why that is and what causes metabolic syndrome. Before we should do that, we're going to define what metabolic syndrome even means. So to break it up into parts, our metabolic system, this is where our body converts food and produces energy. We definitely need that, right? And then syndrome, this is a group of signs and symptoms that produce an abnormal condition, just metabolic syndrome. All right, so what are some causes of metabolic syndrome? Well, there's 5 different ones that we look at. One being high blood sugar, low HDL cholesterol, or AKA our good cholesterol, high triglycerides, large waist circumference, or if we have we hold fat in our abdomen, and then high blood pressure. These are 5 things we look at. And to be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, we have to have 3 out of those 5, okay? So a little bit about just some levels, what we see across the board, and what's considered high or low. For high triglycerides or fat in our blood, it has to be higher than 150. Okay, and this is a lot of numbers. I know that's a lot of numbers, but it's just to increase awareness and potentially for your own self, if you've had these tests done, just to know and have a better understanding of what these tests even mean. Second, high blood sugar. If we have a fasting blood sugar, which means we fast, we don't eat or drink for 8 to 12 hours, you can drink water, but besides that, not so much. 8 to 12 hours, and then you take your blood sugar, and if it's more than 100, that is considered high. In low HDL levels or low good cholesterol, for men and women, it's different in what the level should be. So for men, if it's less than 40, that's considered low, and we don't really want to see that. We want to have lots of good HDL levels in our cholesterol. Then for women, it's less than 50, so they are a little different. Then we have high blood pressure. So a magical number that we often hear is 120/80. If we are higher than that, if we're higher than 130, higher than 85, that's considered high blood pressure. And high blood pressure, again, it's a little tricky because some people just run high, some people run low. It just depends on yourself, and genetics plays a role in this too. So yes, my levels, my normal might be different than your normal. So something to be mindful of. Okay, so metabolic syndrome, a little bit more about it. What happens is we have, again, 3 of those 5 causes we just talked about, either high blood sugar, high triglycerides, high cholesterol, or low HDL cholesterol, and let's see, waist circumference is larger. So if we have 3 out of those 5, then this leads to an increased risk of insulin resistance. So this is another term for metabolic syndrome. Insulin resistance syndrome. So something to be mindful of. And what can happen with this, if someone does have metabolic syndrome diagnosis, this can increase the risk of developing more serious events, such as coronary artery disease, a heart attack, type 2 diabetes, stroke, liver and kidney disease. So a lot can come out of this. So it's good to be on top of your health and manage our lifestyle factors. We're going to talk about that in a second. Okay. So for metabolic syndrome in the United States, this is something that is on the rise, they are noticing. However, I do want to note there is currently not a lot of research on this because it is kind of new, and they're just working more on this now. It's not a whole lot of new research. So for example, this study is from 2011 to 2016, which is a little bit later than I would have liked. I would like something a little more closer to 2022, but we're going to work with what we have here. And according to this study, they had 17,000 participants, and about, 32 to 36, excuse me, let me go back. In 2011, we had 32% of the 17,000 participants be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. And then at 2016, it jumped to 36.9%. So it is on the rise. Even though that's not too significant, what we did see in this study is increased significance among women. So that jumped quite a bit. from 31% to 36%. Young adults, so adults 20 to 39, 16.2% to 21.3%. And then Asian and Hispanic adults. So those also jumped, especially Hispanic adults from 32.9% to 40.4%. So again, this increase of prevalence of metabolic syndrome in the United States is happening. Really, I want to just increase awareness of what it is, because I personally had never heard of this until doing some research on it. So I think it's important because having these conditions can impact our metabolism, and we want to try and stay on top of that. I know that's important for us. So how do we treat it? The good news is that there are just some lifestyle changes we can make to, one, decrease our work on our blood pressure, our cholesterol, and our sugars, but that's going to decrease the risk of developing metabolic syndrome if we can control those conditions first. So how can we do that? Well, one, we're gonna work on maintaining our normal blood pressure. We're gonna talk about how we do that in a second. Checking our blood sugar regularly if this is a concern. Controlling our cholesterol, maintaining a healthy weight, eating a well-balanced diet, and engaging in physical activity. These are all things that we can do without jumping on, hopefully not jumping on medication. If we can control it with physical activity, just in diet first, that would be great. That way we can avoid medication. However, I understand that some conditions do require medication. So if that's what your doctor has prescribed, keep doing that until you hear otherwise. But again, just a healthy lifestyle of diet and exercise play a major factor in decreasing your blood pressure and cholesterol levels. Okay, so how do we check our blood pressure and how do we maintain it? Well, a couple of things to note. There is no symptom for hypertension, so I can't just sit here and say, oh, I'm feeling like I have high blood pressure. That can't happen. So the only way that we can measure our blood pressure is to go get it checked and have it read. So where can we do that? We can do that at a doctor's office. We can do that at a pharmacy, and we can do it at home now. They have some cuffs that you can bring home, order through Amazon, wherever, and so you can do it in the comfort of your home and do it as often as you would like to. A couple of things. The following may affect your blood pressure reading, so be mindful of this. One, white coat syndrome. Maybe you've heard of this, but we just get a little more anxious, a little more nervous in the doctor's office. So you might feel a little more nervous, which may affect your reading and have higher blood pressure. Also considering what you drank, ate, or did before the reading. Did you drink coffee before you had your blood pressure reading? Because that's going to spike up your blood pressure. Did you go exercise for 30 minutes and then walk into the doctor's office? That may impact it too. And then lastly, sitting position. We want to avoid crossing our legs and dropping our arm to the side during the blood pressure reading, because this can impact the accuracy of the test. And it's important to get an accurate reading because we really want to know what a good blood pressure is at baseline. So that way we can, understand the risks, our personal risk of developing heart disease if our blood pressure is high or on the higher end. So it's good to be mindful of this and have an accurate reading. Okay, here are some blood pressure category levels. What's considered normal is if we have our systolic, we're less than 100, our diastolic, we're less than 80. That's what we're kind of shooting for. So that's, again, that 120/80 area. And then if we have high blood pressure, that's where we see 130 range, 130 between 139 and then 80 to 89. So if we're in that range, that's the first stage of high blood pressure. So something to be mindful of. Again, in that 130/85 range, that's where it's considered high. So just be mindful of it. Okay, so how can we look at treating our high blood pressure? Well, there's a diet called the DASH diet, which stands for dietary approaches to stop hypertension. And pretty much all this is, it's more just like guidelines to help you have a well-balanced diet, consuming foods that are rich in protein, fiber, potassium, and that are low in salt and saturated fats. That's the big thing. So on the right-hand side, we have this picture here, and it's just things just to limit, and I say limit for sure, because just quitting cold turkey, not necessarily a good idea, because it's going to be really hard to maintain, and we all like to indulge every once in a while. That's just part of life, right? So if we can just limit, and everything in moderation is key. So limiting our fatty meats, our full-fat dairies, sugar-sweetened beverages, sweets, and our sodium intake, okay? That's kind of how this DASH diet looks like. And again, it's just one of the guidelines, so it's just about maybe instead of having steak one night, maybe we try some salmon just to mix it up and see if we can make some healthier choices. And slowly and gradually, because if we do it all at once, it might be hard to follow long term. Okay, so then a couple of things that have shown to be helpful in reducing our blood pressure, one being physically active. So exercising for 2 hours and 30 minutes each week is recommended. So going to TriFitness, for example, twice a week, that's about 2 hours, a little over that. That's great. So then during the rest of our time, can we fit in another 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise? So walking around, biking, things like this, just to get our heart rate up. So some aerobic exercise. Then we have avoid smoking. This is easier said than done for some, but it's important to note that smoking does raise our blood pressure. And so if you do smoke and we do have higher blood pressure, I do recommend just talking to a doctor about finding ways to help you quit. Yes, and then limiting your alcohol consumption. It's different for men and women. For men, we're recommending no more than 2 alcoholic drinks per day, and for women, no more than 1 alcoholic drink per day. With this being said, sometimes with alcohol, you might drink a couple, 2 or 3 one night, and the next night you don't have any. So again, it kind of comes out all in the wash. It gets all balanced in the end, but just being mindful of how many drinks we are having a day, because this can be impacting our blood pressure overall. And then lastly, sleep. Sleep is really important for our heart health, so establishing a good sleep routine will help in lowering our blood pressure and getting us to that 120/80 range that we're shooting for. Okay, now for controlling our blood sugar, it's a little different. But it's really important to control our blood sugar, because if by maintaining our blood sugar in our target levels, which I'll talk about later, this can help to prevent or delay the onset of heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease. There's lots of other things that are connected to blood sugar. And how we check our blood sugar, 2 ways that are most common. So having a blood sugar meter, this just measures our a blood sample at our fingertips, and it checks it right in the moment. And then a continuous glucose monitor, which is placed underneath the skin, and it kind of does like a check-in every couple of minutes to see where we're at. When to check our blood sugar now? Quite often throughout the day, especially if your doctor has said, hey, you're at risk for having prediabetes, or you are running high as far as blood sugar goes. So things that we can do to help control, just being mindful and checking your blood sugar throughout the day. This is something that your doctor has talked to you about. Well, okay, so when to check it? After waking up, before bedtime, before a meal, and then 2 hours after a meal. So that is quite a lot during the day. And so again, if having the glucose monitor on just does it kind of automatically, if that works better, great. But again, just talking to a doctor about all of these things and how to check it, definitely recommended, so that way they can get you on the best course and help to control our blood sugar levels. So some other things to be mindful of, some symptoms of high blood sugar include feeling tired, feeling thirsty, having blurry vision, and increased urine frequency. So again, it's not going to be just one of these symptoms. It's going to be probably most of them. If you're experiencing all of these things and you're drinking loads of water, but you still feel really thirsty all the time, then that's something to note. Just increase some awareness on things that are happening with us. That may be a symptom of high blood sugar, again, if you're experiencing more than one of these symptoms consistently. How we can treat high blood sugar: 1, physical activity, and I'm gonna take a little note here. Most of the treatment ideas are very similar across the board for high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and our cholesterol. So if we can start implementing some of these good lifestyle habits now, it can address all of these areas. So, and that's a win. Okay, if your doctor is prescribing medication for high blood sugar, definitely keep taking it. I recommend you keep taking it, okay? because it is trying to help you, and hopefully we can get to a point where we don't rely on it. But if that's something that we need right now, we need it right now, and that's okay. Following a diabetes meal plan, that might be helpful too for managing blood sugar, and that's what this picture looks like on the right. It's pretty much a lot of leafy greens, half our plate really, and then we're having lean proteins, avoiding those fatty meats, and then lastly some whole wheat starches and grains. That would make a smaller chunk of our plate. All right, then checking our blood sugar regularly, like we just talked about earlier. And then if you are requiring insulin, just staying on top of it, because insulin is helping and it's part of the plan of care. So if that's something that we need right now, just staying on top of it. And this will all allow us to have better control of ourselves and our health overall. Okay, here are some levels about just blood glucose chart, what these levels look at and when they're looked at, okay? So for example, for our fasting blood sugar, which we talked about earlier, if we're in that 80 to 100 range, that's what we want to see. If we're higher than 100, that is considered impaired glucose, and so that might be like prediabetes range, something like that. So just being mindful of where your levels are at right now, and again, they are different. So fasting, again, that is not having any food or drinks except water for 8 to 12 hours, and then we take a blood sugar test. And if it's over 100, that's considered high. And then after eating is different. See, it jumped up quite a bit. So if it's between 170 and 200, then that's considered normal. And if 2 to 3 hours after eating, if it's between 120 and 140, that's normal. And if it's over 140, that's a little high. So again, it's just different on when you eat and what's currently in your system. So our last one is about controlling cholesterol. All right, with cholesterol, there are two different types of cholesterol in our systems. All right, or things to consider, I guess, not even in our systems. One being blood cholesterol. This is in our systems, and this is a waxy fat-like substance that is made by the body. And what it does is it's important because it helps us to, one, make our hormones and also to digest fatty foods. So we need our blood cholesterol for sure. Second, being dietary cholesterol. This is found in animal foods and products like meat, dairy products, and eggs. And what we find is that if you have less dietary cholesterol, then that's going to be associated with a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. So something to be mindful of, again, just talked about this earlier with the DASH diet, but just limiting animal products in general, kind of mixing it up every now and then with maybe some more fish or some more legumes, beans, something else to mix up and find a different protein. For cholesterol, we have two different types. We have our LDL, aka our bad cholesterol, and then we have our HDL, aka our good cholesterol. So for our LDL cholesterol, this actually makes up most of our body's cholesterol, which is interesting, but higher levels of it are going to increase the risk of heart disease, okay? And we're going to talk about some levels and what's considered normal and high for LDL cholesterol. And then we have our HDL cholesterol. This is our good cholesterol. And what this does is it plays an important role in, one, absorbing our bad cholesterol and carrying it back to the liver to be flushed out. If we have higher levels of HDL cholesterol, that lowers the risk of heart disease. So we really want some good high levels of HDL cholesterol. Okay, so talking about how we can control our cholesterol, there's a couple of levels to be mindful of. For our total cholesterol levels, one, we want it less than 200. That's considered desirable. If it is higher, just be mindful of it. Again, genetics does play a role in cholesterol levels. For example, I have higher cholesterol and I trend higher. And that's just a part of family history. So just talking to your doctor about it. For LDL cholesterol, if it's less than 100, that's considered ideal. If it does go over 100, it's just higher. And so something, again, just being mindful of where LDL cholesterol levels are at and what the levels mean. And then lastly, our HDL or our good cholesterol levels. For men and women, it is different from the couple of slides ago. For men, if it's less than 40, that is considered an increased risk for developing heart disease. And then for women, if it's less than 50, same thing. So those are our low levels, and we don't want that. We want our HDL actually on the higher end. How we check our cholesterol levels, what we're going to do is go get a lipid profile. So we're going to go to the doctor and they're going to take a blood sample, and you're going to do this after fasting for 8 to 12 hours to get an accurate test. So they'll take a lipid profile and they'll check out what your total is, your LDL, and your HDL. Interestingly enough, healthy adults should only have their cholesterol checked every 4 to 6 years. And that's not that often, which I kind of found surprising. However, if it does run in your family history, getting it checked more frequently is definitely recommended because you want to stay on top of that and reduce the risk of developing heart disease. Okay? For controlling our cholesterol and some habits we can do in our lifestyle to help treat it, funny enough, they're the exact same things that we would do for really for checking our blood sugar and staying on top of that, but also our blood pressure. So very similar things. The only thing that's I want to really note is just healthy eating choices. So again, just limiting our foods that are high in saturated fat, like our animal products, and choosing more unsaturated fats, like our nuts and our avocados. That's some good stuff. Just alternatives to change it up a little bit. Same thing, we're going to want to avoid smoking because smoking hardens our arteries and causes damage to our blood vessels. So we want to avoid smoking, limiting our alcohol consumption again, and then physical activity is always important. So across the board, pretty much the same set of standards that we're looking at and guidelines for how we're going to control our blood sugar, cholesterol, and blood pressure. But yeah, today was our last video session. I hope you found this helpful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We are there Monday through Wednesday. My name is Hannah, and I really have appreciated y'all listening to all of our different talks over the course of these past 12 weeks. So thanks again so much, and I hope you found this helpful.